Good morning. This is Mona, and this is my morning view today, winter edition 2026. Let's extend out that arm. Winter 2026, and it is Memory Monday. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about Friday. So, if you remember, Friday, Feisty Friday, my day to offend. It's a possibility I offended some people. I don't know. That means I did my job. But I'm just going to clarify a few things about this channel. I would say channel because this gets uploaded to YouTube. So, without further ado, after you have finished watching this video, go over to YouTube to my channel, Mona E. Harrison. Mona E. Harrison. Mona E. Harrison is different than my Facebook profile. So you can go over there and hit subscribe. Hit subscribe, like, share, comment, notifications, get all the bells and whistles, and do the same here. Like, share, comment. Helps the algorithm. Helps it to get out to more people. Of course, if you don't like the content, you won't share it. If you love the content, you may share it. You have full permission to share my content. I have it open to the public, but not all of the public sees because the algorithm only allows so many people to see. Okay, so moving right along. I talked about something last week that was not biblical, okay? It was not biblical, as in it was not in the Bible. Whenever I share something outside of the Bible, I am not taking it as gospel. I'm not taking it as that is the way it is or was or should be. I bring up subjects like this. There is this individual that I saw on YouTube, trusted face, like his content. And he said something that bothered me. He said something that I had never heard before. After being a Christian for over 45 years, maybe over, pretty sure over 45 years. I'd have to do the math of how old I am from the time I came to Christ as a almost 18-year-old. When you see a trusted face, and you've heard something you've never heard before, especially, for me, it sends up red flags. It sends up signals that says, hey, check this out. Check it out, right? That's part of the reason why I did the Feisty Friday. It is to say, hey, there is stuff out there that may or may not be true. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it is true. I'm saying be aware that there are things out there that may or may not be true. I am real, R-E-A-L. I'm not polished. What I bring is impromptu. Even if the trusted face is me, okay? If the trusted face is me, and there's something that's not settling with you, do some research. But don't just do research, because intellect will mislead you. You need the discernment of the Holy Spirit. So before you research anything, you should bring it to the Lord and ask Him to guide your research, to help you with your research, to make it clear on whether this is real, R-E-A-L, or real, R-E-E-L. Okay? Last week I said, really? Really? Is that what he died for? That is a question. That is a question. It is not a statement. Okay? 2. I said, some of this reminds me of a dime store novel. Now, do you all remember? It's Memory Monday. Do you remember maybe in high school when they taught about dime store novels? A lot of it took place back in like the 1800s, last into the 1800s, early 1900s. You had Billy the Kid, you had Buffalo Bill Cody, you had Calamity Jane, you had Davy Crockett. You know, I mean, there was this real people doing real things. But the dime store novel, 1, made them larger than life, but 2, they kind of stretched the story. They fabricated some of the events and some of the stories to sell the dime store novel as these people are supernatural. They are amazing, supernatural of the day. We have a whole different concept of what's supernatural today compared to what they did because of film and production and movies and wild imaginations and, you know. But dime store novels took something that was true and fabricated it, making it distorted. That was not a new concept. Not a new concept. So the Gnostics were a faction back in the day that tried to kind of undermine certain elements of Christianity. They had their own belief system. You can look them up. You can look up what they believed and what they... Not agnostic, Gnostic. Anyways, I said last week that's a possibility that somebody fabricated the story of why Peter was crucified, and then it became written, and then you have the story of today. Or Friday, the story that I had heard on YouTube and was like questioning, hey, maybe we should look into some of these things. Maybe we should take a dive, possibly on a Thirsty Thursday, to find out whether it is true or not. What kind of evidence do we have to certain subject matters? And you can't take everything as written as truth. That's why you need discernment. That's why you need more than one piece of evidence. Because one piece of evidence, if somebody is judged, if somebody is convicted on one piece of evidence, people could be set up. People could be falsely accused on one piece of evidence. Back in the days of Jesus, and before, you had to have 2 male witnesses back in the day. 2 male witnesses. Not just 1, 2. Now, could they conspire? Absolutely. They conspired against Jesus. It's one of the reasons Jesus elevated women by having Mary and the women who went to the garden be the first one to see him. And Mary was charged to go tell the others. A female being the first one to bring the good news, the resurrection of Jesus. That's why Peter and John ran to the tomb, because one, they had to see for themselves. Two, you had to have two male witnesses for it to count. If Mary just was the only one to go spread this, nobody would believe her. So I said, one, I'm not going to get all the things that I said, but I said, one, some of this reminded me of a dime store novel. Two, I said, really? Three, I said, maybe this should open up for a research, a discussion concerning the martyrs. I'm not saying I believe this. And when I bring something for Feisty Friday that says something that you don't agree with, I told you that as a trusted faith, research something if I say something that is, you feel is off. Okay? Those little red flags. Not because your religion told you, not because your pastor told you, or all the things you've heard from other people in your faith, because nobody knows everything. I don't know everything. I'll tell you that straight out right now. I do not. And if somebody sits there and says they know everything, that's a big red flag that they probably know very, 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 very little. And they pump themselves up with pride that they are all-knowing. They are not God. They are not all-knowing. And if they ever say they are, run. Run fast. Not physically. Well, you may have to, but for the most part, just excuse yourself from their tutelage, because pride will be weaved into everything they say. And pride is one of, I'm going to call it something. Do not get me wrong on this. Do not get me wrong. I'm calling it by the name that it's called. And then I'm going to explain why it's called that. Because I've heard people jam on this one phrase. Okay? The Jezebel spirit. The Jezebel spirit. It is not the spirit of Jezebel. It is not. Okay? It is not the spirit of Jezebel. But there are spirits that were manipulating in her life. Spirits manipulate people. Some unknowingly and some very willingly. Because there's an exchange for something. Sometimes power. Sometimes wealth, all twisted, all temporary. But in the pride, there's blindness to that. The Jezebel spirit had a spirit, it was a spirit of pride, Now my mind's starting to forget what they were. Control and offense. Pride, control, and offense. So it was basically three spirits that were operating in Jezebel. You got to remember, she was not Jewish. She was from a foreign god. Grew up worshiping this particular god. Usually when people say Jezebel spirit, they're thinking seductress. They're thinking seductress. Because, well, in her religion that she practiced, there was like things like prostitution and sexual practices within her religion. She wasn't doing anything outside of her religion of the day, because otherwise you could say all of them were seductresses. They were all prostitutes. They were all, but that's not it. No. No. Hers was pride, control or manipulation, and offense. It all started with, I think it was Naaman, I think his name was. It started with an N. He had a garden. And King Ahaz was like, oh, I want this guy's vineyard. I want this guy's land, this vineyard, that I can see from my window of the palace for a garden. I want this garden. How noble of this individual to want a garden. He wants a place of beauty, or maybe a place where you can grow vegetables. I don't know what kind of garden he wanted. But he wanted a garden. So he goes to him and he says, you know, I'll buy your land for the garden. I want a garden here on your vineyard. So instead of your vineyard, I'll buy the land and then I'll make my garden there. And he's like, no, this land has been in my family for generations. It's all I really have, and I want to be able to give it to my children. Something to that effect. I don't want it to be dime store novel. I'm just taking it from memory. It is Memory Monday. Telling the stories from memory helps to remember them, but there may be some nuances that I might have a little off. I can't remember whether, he's saying he wanted him for his, to give to his generation. So that may or may not be part of it. All right. You can look it up. It's in the Bible. This is in the Bible. And he wouldn't do it. So Ahaz comes home all sulking. Oh my gosh, I can't get the land for my garden. Boo-hoo, I'm such a weak little individual. I'm just going to go into my room and maybe go in the backyard and dig up worms because I'm just, And Jezebel's like, you're the king! What are you doing groveling? I'll take care of it. He could have done an eminent domain, just kicked the guy off the land and procured it. As a possibility, he could have done that. Everything would have been well. He would have had his land. Naaman would have had nothing, but he would have had his life. But Jezebel got involved. You're the king! Hello? Pride. How dare anybody think that they can say no? How dare anybody think that they have any type of power above the king? Pride. She goes and she manipulates. She tells the neighbors a lie that got them very upset and got this rumor spread about Naaman. I think his name was Naaman. Again, Look it up. Look it up. Which brought justice for him to be killed and his land taken. Can't remember what the lie was, but there was manipulation spread out. Control. I'm taking control because the king is too much of a child. He's too much crying in his room instead of acting like a king. So I have to take it into my control to make sure it gets done. Pride and manipulation. And offense. Offense. I am offended by this individual for thinking he can say no to the king. Huh. Offense. So the Jezebel spirit is not the spirit of Jezebel. It is talked about as the Jezebel spirit because it has 3 spirits involved, possibly more, because maybe the seductive one is there as well. But I know those 3. It's a matter of, let me get where the sun isn't going to blind you. It's a matter of the spirits that manipulate an individual. And that individual allows them, whether knowingly or unknowingly, to allow them to manipulate them. And to do the things that they do under the force of pride, manipulation or control, and offense. So you get offended. Be wary. If you, sounds like a feisty Friday, but it's kind of a combination. It's a continuation, maybe, I guess. If you think you know everything, pride. If you want to take control and manipulate the outcome, yeah, it may be something that you may need to do a search in your heart for, if you're a Christian. You may need to do a search in your heart. If you're not a Christian, well, you should still do a search in your heart. But what motivation would you have to search in your heart if you're not a Christian? If you are a Christian, your motivation should be a closer walk with God, a transformation closer to have more of God in your life. And if all you're looking at is the flaws and manipulation that you can do or try, and you're offended, and you think you know everything, well, then you're in danger. Red flags. Danger, Will Robinson. I know there's some things that I need to settle in my heart. I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I tell you to check out what I say. And any pastor worth his weight in gold will tell you the same thing. Check out what he says. I've known many pastors that have made mistakes. Many of them. And I've come to them with the Word of God in my hand and say, you said this, but this says this. What do you say? You know, was it just an error? Was it, just part of the story? Is it, you were conveying part and I had another part, so it wasn't really, you didn't need to tell the whole part because it was the part that helped your sermon out, whatever. Sometimes they'll accidentally switch something for something, there's metal trumpets versus shofars, things like that have been mixed up. Oh, they blew the metal trumpet. No, they blew the shofar, or vice versa. There's times when they mix up names. I've done it. I've done it a lot. I mix up names at the school all the time. I mix up names when I'm telling Bible stories too. It happens, It doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them idiots. It doesn't make them, you don't know what you're talking about because you made an error. We are human. We make errors. Especially when you're rushed. But if they tell you nothing about looking it up for yourself, if you're to blindly follow everything they say, if you look at somebody that you trust, that you see, that you've trusted in their content, and it's something you've never heard before, question it. You are allowed to question. You are allowed to question. You're not allowed to get arrogant. You're not allowed to get manipulative. You're not allowed to get prideful, like you know it all and they're wrong because this is what your pastor told you. This is what your church community told you. This is what your faith told you. This is what your religion told you. We all act like we're peasants of the of old, where we didn't have a Bible, we didn't have the ability to read the Bible, and we were left for the bishops and the priests and the religious leaders to tell us everything because we just, didn't have access to that information. We have more than enough access to information. And it's not just the information. It is discernment and understanding. All right, so that's where I'm going to leave you with for today, because that's a lot. It's a lot. Clarifying that I don't believe that that's what Peter was talking about. I don't. Okay? From last Feisty Friday. It wasn't something biblical that I talked about. It was something external of the Bible about biblical characters. And I was questioning, not making statements. Make that clear so that you understand. I really dislike having to explain myself. But just in case there is someone that is going off the handle right now because I said something that is contradictory to their belief, or if there's somebody going off the handle right now because they're like, oh, that's what Christianity is all about. I don't want any part of it. That means you weren't listening. That's what that means. That means you were not listening to what I was saying. And you have to listen very carefully, because sometimes I will say something in dramatic flair, or to get a point, I will round something up. And if all you hear is that part, and you don't hear the in-between, I am going to sound heretical. So for those of you that are worried about my content, maybe you just haven't heard my content long enough to know the style that I bring, which is real, R-E-A-L. not real. R-E-E-L. All right. That's all I got for you today. Blessings, everybody. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow for Tips Tuesday. All right. Bye. I got to take my glove off.